Welcome to the Set to Lead podcast, the online mentoring platform for emerging and current leaders. My name is Marianne Samdi, leadership coach and talent development expert, and I will be your host. Hello. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Thanks so much, Marianne. How are you?
I'm doing well. I really appreciate you being with us today.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
So today we're talking about an ugly monster we all face more than we want to, called conflict. But before we jump into that, tell our audience a little bit about your background.
Okay, thank you. I'm a management consultant and an executive coach and a facilitator. And for the last 30 plus years, I've been working with all kinds of organizations on their thorniest problems, the ones that have seemed stuck and unfixable and really sometimes unfocused and stressful. And in addition to my work with clients, I write frequently for Harvard Business Review and for Forbes.
Wow, excellent background. 30 years, man.
Well, if you like your work, it's easy to keep going.
Exactly. I read this interesting stat recently that said 49% of conflict is caused by warring egos. What do they mean by warring egos?
I guess they're thinking that, we think about ourselves when we're in a conflict, and we think about, why is this happening to me, and what should I do to protect myself? And we can become very self-focused. And when you're feeling under pressure, or in some cases even under attack, it's all about you in the moment. And so whatever is your approach to things, that's what's out there for your opponent to see. I think it's really interesting that they came up with 49%, and I wonder what the other proportions are.
Well, I have them here, actually. So 49% was warring egos, 34% experienced conflict caused by workplace stress, and 33% experienced conflicts due to heavy workloads.
Okay, so that's very, very interesting, and my bet is that all they are looking at is what the trigger for the conflict was,
Yes.
not necessarily the underlying causes.
Okay.
So the truth is, I don't put too much stock in that. Anybody can feel crummy on any given day and therefore behave in a conflict-focused kind of way. The straw that broke the camel's back, or somebody didn't speak to them nicely, or even they had a flat tire on their way to work and they were just primed to go off on somebody. I have not done research, but I certainly have plenty of field experience, and I think much of the true reason for conflict is less personal. It's more what's happening in the workplace, and that we don't respond to it all that well.
Yeah. People don't respond to it all that well based off my experience.
No.
I don't respond to it all that well at times myself. Why do you think that is? Is it possible to get into these type of conflict situations and handle them well?
Oh, it's definitely possible to handle them well, but that takes, in the moment, more effort than doing whatever your natural response to a frightening or disrupting thing is. I mean, when you say you don't respond well, none of us respond well. Conflict is the kind of situation, if it feels like an attack, where all of us go to whatever our most natural danger mode is, whether it's fight, flight, freeze, or what's now sometimes being called fold. Just give up. We
Yeah.
all have these mechanisms for dealing with danger.
Yeah. You're right. Everyone treats it a different way. Let's talk about folding for a minute. Um, I guess would part of folding be not addressing the issues at all? Is that a part
Yes,
of the full
yes,
definition?
sure. That could be either freeze or fold.
Yeah.
Um, it could be freeze if somebody in your office does something that you believe is wrong and it kind of shocks you and you don't know what to do about it. And so you can't think of anything to say and you're kind of transfixed. It's almost like your thoughts aren't there and you just stop and then you try to go on with whatever you were doing because you really have no idea what to do. And that's a completely natural and human reaction. It's why so many of us, 2 hours later think, oh, I wish I said. And when you're complaining to your colleagues or your loved ones, then you can think of better things to say, but in the moment you froze.
Mm-hmm.
The fold thing could be that, also could be that a particular colleague does the same thing that bothers you almost repetitively. And it's not that you're frozen, it's that you are hopeless and helpless. That's more like what folding is. And you think, oh, it's just no use. I shouldn't even bother. There isn't possibly anything I could say that would make any difference. That's folding. It's like a full retreat.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I guess when you freeze or if you fold, sometimes the situation just festers and gets worse.
Oh, for sure. Most likely, right? Anything that's bad that we don't address is likely to get worse. Very unfortunate.
So how do we determine when's the right time to speak up after maybe you've frozen temporarily? Hopefully it's a temporary freeze or you've held. How do you figure out when you should open up that can of worms and speak up?
Okay, you put that really well. So if you have frozen and can't do anything in the moment, you might go away and think to yourself, what could I have done or what could I do better? Or you might discuss that with a colleague or a friend. The amazing thing is there's almost always a way to go back. Mm-hmm. And your hypothesis that there's a right time for it is very good. I think I'm going to combine a bit of discussion about right time, wrong time in a kind of compare and contrast mode, if that's okay.
Oh, phenomenal. That's what I want.
Great. Okay. So wrong time can be pretty clear. Wrong time for you is if you are too upset to control yourself, if you know you could overreact, if you know you could react in ways that are a pattern for you that hasn't worked, those are times not to engage in a conflict. Also, not when you are really cranky, already angry, 6 things have already gone wrong that day, or you're, what's that expression? Hangry. Combination of hungry and angry, bad, right? Because you're overly sensitized and you could either blow or lose sight of the smart things you figured out you should do. You can actually forget them all because you're under pressure. So those are times that are not so great for you. Mm-hmm. But it's also important to look at the other person. Mm-hmm. Like if you know your boss is an irascible bear until she has had 2 cups of coffee, not 1, but 2, unless there is, a fire or blood on the ground, there is no smart reason to go and talk to her before she's had her 2 cups.
Right.
Or if you know she's just had a terrible interaction with her boss, any of those kinds of things. When you know someone is already in a bad place, is not a good time to reopen a terrible subject. Having said that, though, sometimes you have to do it anyway. because it's necessary, because there's an emergency or there's a problem that's lingered too long. And the fact that you're afraid doesn't mean it's the wrong time. It just means you're afraid. So looking for right times, now let me give you a few things that might be helpful. When you feel you have the facts, so that it's not just your reaction, but that you can actually discuss in a measured way why the thing that happened wasn't good, what the impacts might be, any research or data you have about the situation. You want to go at a time when you are actually prepared. Off the cuff, some people are good at it. Most people are not.
Yeah.
So preparing yourself is really important. And the other thing is about the time, but it's also about the location. Like, it's usually better not to have a conflict in front of other people. So if you can do it in private, that's much better. Wait till after the meeting is over and then go back with them to their office instead of raising it right in the middle of the meeting with everybody else milling around, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Is there any specific tips that you can share in terms of how to check your tone? Sometimes when we're so passionate around a conflict, our tone can mess the whole scenario up. What can we do to check our tone when we're having, conflict-based type of conversations? Are there any tricks around that?
This is a very sophisticated question, and it's very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to do because we don't necessarily hear ourselves the way others hear us. So the first thing is actually inquiring of people you trust how you sounded when you said that last thing. Ask your trusted colleague how you came across in the meeting. Look for sources of feedback so at least you can tell if you're taking a different or a negative tone. Very often, your friends and family will be so happy to point it out to you if you let them know that you're interested in knowing.
Yeah.
Make it a little game for them. They will love to play that game. Right? Yes, very fun. Take the opportunity then, by the way, to apologize because you didn't mean to have that tone. You really just wanted to get your point across, and you will try to do better. Mm-hmm. For yourself, I don't even know how well you can police tone per se, but you can certainly be aware of your body. Tone is something that happens as an interaction between your thoughts and your body. So you can notice if your throat is really tight and your mouth is dry, and it might be more likely that you would take the bad tone if your method of speech production is affected. Similarly, if you're in that kind of mode, the expression to see red?
Yes. Oh, I know it well.
Okay. So if your head is hot, jaws are tight, forehead is squinched up, those things that say you are on the edge of anger. Sometimes people refer to a biting anger because you can feel it in your mouth. If you are in any of those states, breathe first a few times. And the most important part is actually the exhalation. Make sure your exhalation, that you let it go through to the end, as opposed to taking a whole bunch of short, quick breaths. You want to calm your body and then start to speak, because you'll be so much more composed and in charge of yourself.
Yeah, so it's more than actions we've seen on TV or in movies. It can quite be effective if you inhale deeply and exhale slowly and all the way to the end to just help you control your tone.
Yes, absolutely right. And if you find that you're so agitated that you can't take a deep inhale, don't force yourself. Just exhale as much as you can. Pause for another second, and then try the inhale.
Do you find in the 30 years of experience that you have that people find it hard to pause a conversation until they get themselves together? So, for example, if you're in a workplace scenario and the discussion has gotten heated, is it okay to say, you know what, can we pause for a moment? Let me go to the restroom or something, and let's resume in like 10 minutes?
So I'll tell you a funny story. When I was a young manager, it was my responsibility to convene and lead a weekly meeting at one point. And it would often go off the rails because people didn't come to help each other. They came, to do a bunch of posturing often. Mm-hmm. And in one of these meetings, I got really upset and I knew I was going to cry. And, you don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And I needed some way to get myself out of the room. And I did not know then how to say gracefully, let's take a pause. Mm-hmm. So I said what came to mind. I said, oh, I hear my mother calling me. This was before cell phones.
Oh, okay.
I just said this in the middle of the meeting, and I got up and I left the room. Mm-hmm. And I went to the restroom, and I breathed and washed my face and calmed down, and I went back. Now, this was such strange behavior for the other people in the meeting that they were sitting, right? They were sitting very quietly waiting for me to come back. And when I came back, they wanted to know what my mother had said. And I explained that, in fact, I knew I was losing control of myself, mm-hmm. and that things had gotten out of hand, and that I needed this break to be able to come back. And for that group of people, after that, anybody could invoke my mother. When the meeting got out of hand, anybody could say, I hear Liz's mother calling. And we would stop, and we would get ourselves back together. So let me give you some suggestions for better pause lines than feel free to use my mother, but,
right.
Better to say, I think we could use a pause. Okay. Plain, simple truth. Mm-hmm. Or it feels like we're a little out of hand, or it seems like we're all getting a little, reactive or overly upset. You have to think about the people you're with and what language will be clear but not actually agitate them more.
Right.
The word reactive could trigger some people. In fact, I'm not reactive. Right. That kind of thing. So you want it to be simple and plain, and if possible, then give a direction about how to take the pause. Why don't we all get some water or another cup of coffee? Mm-hmm. Why don't we just pause for 3 minutes, and then we'll resume? Mm-hmm. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll pick up again. So try to give a kind of instruction so people know what's expected of them.
Thanks for sharing that, Liz, because I think it's important for people to know that it's okay to press that pause button at times. That's how you manage the situation.
Absolutely, and how you get a better result. Not pressing pause when it's really the thing to do just means you'll have a lot of overreactive, agitated people. It's very hard to get anything done. Mm-hmm. It could even be better to say, you know what, we're going round and round on this. Mm-hmm. Let's pause the meeting and resume it tomorrow when we can bring more data to the table.
Excellent. Because sometimes in my experience, a lot of people don't press pause. For me, in my circles and my experiences, a lot of times I see people who just say, in a negative tone, in a very loud way, all right, this meeting is over. So they press stop opposed to pause. And I don't believe that's always very productive.
Not only do I agree with you, and I don't mean any insult to any person in particular that you happen to know, but That does sound a little bit like what a 5-year-old would say when they're losing the game.
Yeah, and a lot of adults act like 5-year-olds.
I'm so sorry that that's the kind of people you know. That's terrible. That's really a shame because there's no need. And the truth is, they don't actually get what they want either.
No, they're frustrated.
Yes, yes, and angry and resentful.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, Liz, do you mind if we have a little bit more fun with this?
Go right ahead.
What I want to do is, I thought this would be a little nice change, is I'm going to read off some common statements about conflict, and you tell me if the statements are true or false. And if you want to add a little bit more details to it, go right ahead.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. So my first one is, conflict is negative and something to avoid. True or false?
I would say that is false so long as nobody is behaving badly.
Okay, I agree. And I brought that up because a lot of people seem to feel that conflict is not your friend. And in my experiences, conflict actually could be very helpful in building relationships.
Not only that, there's a significant amount of data that shows without appropriate conflict, people die. If the co-pilot does not tell the pilot, oh, no, I think we have to do, I don't know how to fly a plane, whatever it is right now, the plane can crash. Or in the operating room, if the nurse doesn't say, doctor, that's the wrong leg, you have an unnecessary operation.
Exactly. There you go. And a lot of people don't see it that way. They feel that, in order to have successful relationships, you always have to agree, and you can never share a difference of opinion.
That seems actually quite frightening to me.
Yeah, me too. But we said it straight. People shouldn't think that way any longer. Here's another one, a statement around conflict. Conflict is a sign of a troubled relationship.
Sometimes. I can't really say that's true or false. Mm-hmm. Very often, conflict is the sign of a fantastic, deep, long-term relationship because people are able to raise problems and therefore resolve them.
Mm-hmm. Here's another one. I am who I am. I can't change the way I react when I'm upset and angry.
Oh, that's definitely false. That's so good that you bring that up. So we all know people who actually say that. First of all, they're selling themselves so short. All of us can change. The question is whether we're willing to and whether we know the better direction. And either we know or someone is helping us how to, but nobody has to be stuck in that if they are a halfway healthy person. Anybody can learn how to change how they react.
Especially if they want to.
No question.
Yeah. Here's another one. Conflict only becomes abusive when there is physical violence.
False. People can be abusive in language and in meaning. And that can be just as disturbing to another human being's life, just as dangerous to their well-being as if someone actually hit them. People can be terrorized without any physical act.
Yeah. And when I also teach leadership and I go in and help to do some teamwork, one of the things that I like to share with my groups is prepare for the conversation before you have it. Maybe you take some time to write down what are some of the key messages you want to share. And I would think that would help you to make sure that you're conveying the right meanings that preserve self-esteem and that are not abusive. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that 100%.
Right. But a lot of people don't do that. They just, it comes to mind. I know I have to have a conversation and they just wing it. And
Right.
I think especially from a position of leadership, you may have the best intentions, but when you don't think about your words or the phrases you want to say, sometimes, conversations get messed up because you didn't take enough time to prepare.
You know what that makes me wonder? Why would people think they should get their way if they aren't even willing to invest in preparing for the conversation?
I don't know. We'd have to ask a few people. To me, it doesn't
Right?
make any sense either. Yeah.
Yeah. If there's something that's important to you,
Yeah.
of course it makes sense to think about it in advance.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we can work on that together, or maybe this podcast will, have our audience think differently moving forward with their next conversation.
Great.
So sometimes I think we have great intentions to work towards an amicable conflict resolution, but we run into responses that frustrate us. Can you share some tips on how to deal with responses that throw us off track? For example, maybe you're dealing with a person who typically plays the martyr. So when you prepare for this conversation and you have it with them, all they're doing is responding with martyr type of feedback. How do you deal with that? That can throw you off sometimes.
Definitely. You think, oh, maybe I shouldn't be raising this. I'm making too big a problem for them. They're already suffering. Any of those
Right.
things.
Right.
For anyone who is expressing their suffering, when you need to have a serious discussion, one of the most valuable things is to acknowledge the suffering first and then move on from it. I can see that this makes you so unhappy, or I can see that this feels like a burden to you. I can see that this and you hear I'm saying I can see. I'm noticing. I notice that you are really looking very upset about this. That's naming a kind of data source. I see from your behavior, I understand from your language that you might feel in such and such a way. So the first thing you're doing is saying, I am paying attention to you.
Mm-hmm.
When most people are behaving badly, it's because they don't think they can get their needs met.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people behave badly because they're evil.
Mm-hmm.
Most people behave badly because they don't know another way to get what they want.
Right.
So if you say, in effect, not these words, please not these words, I see that you are concerned that your needs are not being met, but I see you're mad, or I can tell you're really disappointed in this situation. Say that first and give them a chance, in effect, to acknowledge your acknowledgement. Mm-hmm. That is a moment of potential connection and takes some of the sting out of the rest of the conversation. Doesn't make it all lovely, but it is a place to step on, to stand on, sort of a stepping stone. Mm-hmm. Depending on the situation, it might be appropriate to apologize for that. I'm sorry to add extra tasks when I know you already feel overloaded. That's like a bridging statement. Mm-hmm. But then you have to go and say the business-like thing. These reports are also due. We have to find a way to fix whatever the broken thing is that we're trying to work on. Then you talk practically about why we need to do the thing we need to do. And then you can make a statement like, I hope you're on board with this. I hope you can commit to this. I hope you can help me figure out how we can do it better. So acknowledge them, bridge to being businesslike about whatever the issue is, and ask them if that's okay.
Those are good suggestions. What about the people pleaser, Liz? That person who typically pretends to agree for everything when deep inside they really haven't, and it comes up a next time. It comes up again in another conversation. But for the moment, they're going to say whatever it takes just to pretend that they agree and please everyone in the current situation.
Yes. So this is often called passive aggressiveness. What normally happens with somebody who behaves this way is that you don't know that's what they're doing until they've done it a few times.
Yeah.
Right? And then you feel burned by it.
Yes.
So when they do it the next time, after you've recognized that this is their pattern, you can say to them, I know sometimes you say yes to me as a way to have the conversation go smoothly, but then you don't always deliver. So let's talk about what really needs to happen, and let's figure out if you're really on board, because there's no value in your saying yes to me. It doesn't actually let you off the hook.
Okay. Have you known people pleasers in your lifetime, and have you addressed them this way?
Yes.
Does it work?
Does it work? Sometimes. Particularly if you figure it out fairly early in the relationship and address it early in the relationship. The longer the relationship goes with the passive-aggressive behavior, the harder it is to get them to change, because they've managed to avoid so much disruption or whatever their thing is by doing it. And you have permitted it. So then it gets harder for both you and for them to change the dynamic.
Yeah, that's so true. So true.
Sometimes you have to raise the stakes.
How do you do that?
In effect, it would be, we seem to have this pattern, and it's really upsetting me that we can't have a conversation where we can both operate with confidence afterward. So instead of my saying, I need you to do X, and you say yes and then go do Y, how about if you tell me what you...
Or not do Y, right? Sometimes they don't even
do anything. Right. How about if you tell me what you're really willing to do? And let's see if we can start from there.
Right. Good. Here's another one. What about that person who turns the conflict into a joke? The humor guy or the humor girl, right?
Right.
It's something that hurts you or really impacts you negatively. You want to resolve it, but it's a big joke to them. Or maybe it's not a joke, but your perception is it's a joke because of their body language.
Yeah, what I'd say about that is a kind of deflection. Actually, let me take what you said. So sometimes they're making a mean joke, but mostly when somebody's making a joke in a situation like that, it's a kind of deflection. They are either trying to lighten the mood or to say it's not such a big deal. But if the reason you're having the discussion is because it is a big deal, then I think it's important to say something along the lines of, it sounds like this may not be meaningful or important to you. You think it's a light thing. And that's okay. That's how it strikes you. The fact is, though, that it is important to me, and that's why I would like us to pursue it together.
I like that approach.
Okay, no outrage, just saying what's really true.
Yeah. And lastly, Liz, what about that person who just avoids you? They don't want to talk. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it this week. They don't want to talk about it next week, next month. They're just constantly avoiding you.
So this depends a lot on where they are relative to you in the hierarchy, whether they have something you really need. Sometimes somebody who avoids you all the time, the best thing at work is, in a very practical way, you have an email chain that shows how many times you've tried to meet and how you've tried to pursue it via email and that you haven't gotten responses from them. And then you go to your boss and you say, I'm not sure what to do. I can't get this person to talk to me. Do you have advice?
Right.
Sometimes that's one you can't handle on your own, because you can't force people to talk to you unless you're the one with the absolute authority.
Right. Right. So in those cases, you need intervention.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone by, Liz. I've enjoyed all these great insights you shared today, but we've got to go. Before we go, though, tell the listeners the best way to follow you and your work.
The easiest way is to go to my website. That's www.lizkislik.com, LIZKISLIK.com. And at the website, they'll find lots of information about me, lots more content because I write for these publications and I have a weekly blog. There's lots of material there that goes over some of this ground, and they can sign up for receiving that stuff by email, and there's a free ebook on dealing with the interpersonal aspects of conflict at work, if they'd like that. And they can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Well, thank you, Liz. I appreciate it again.
Glad to be with you, Marianne.